Here's what happened. Last night was President Trump's State of the Union. And as small business owners, you may not care about politics, but politics cares about you. And I want to go through some key points in that State of the Union that relate to what we've been talking about with this movement of making America's future a small business renaissance. Hearing these points from the president gets me really excited. When we can understand the progress that we're making and realize that your voice, the actions you're taking, does have an impact, that can help create way more momentum. You know, you've experienced that in your own small business with the power of momentum. And the lie that was sold to me as a small business owner is that if you can't control it, then you should ignore it and just focus on your own life. But the issue is when we are not focused on government and our elected officials, and it doesn't mean you got to be 24/7, 365 in this thing. You don't have to. It's just taking this time to be informed, and my job is to help you to be informed. But when we can focus on this area, or let's put it this way, when we're not informed and we don't have our attention on this area when it comes to government or elected officials, really bad things can happen in our country. We got to ask ourselves, do we trust our politicians? And usually it's a no to start. So we have to have accountability here. And it's important to work with our elected officials in order to improve our country overall. As small business owners, we can't do it alone, but we got to make sure that we are aware and informed of what is happening with with the policies in this country, because we have over 1,000 industries, and there are regulations to taxes, and there's a bunch of barriers of entry to all these different industries that we have to make sure that we're addressing them from multiple angles. Because what I want to do with this show is also make sure to help you to realize that when it comes to the economy, culture, politics, theology, it is all interconnected. Not just for your business, but also for your overall quality of life. I mean, you're living in this country. So let's get into these points. Welcome back to the show. And how I relate to government and could be helpful for you as a small business owner, especially if you don't care about politics, because I didn't at first. I grew up liberal, and then I've noticed now currently for me, I'm more conservative. I don't like to be placed in a box. I base it off of the ideas that we're talking about. But I've gone through the full range of political beliefs to actually figure out what it is that I do believe, and what do I hold for values, and what do I want to preserve in this country. So for the government, how I think about it is a big oak tree that's right outside your bedroom, and it's right next to the AC unit. And let's say a branch from the oak tree falls down on top of that AC unit, and it's a small little branch, and it's making that dull little, or the ticking sound. And you're hearing that, and you're trying to fall asleep. It can be really difficult if you don't go outside and remove that branch, and you're just trying to ignore it, or you add earplugs in, you're adding layers to this. It can make it difficult to fall asleep. Like, you could just go outside, remove the branch, and then you're able to fall asleep a lot better. Then adding all these layers of like, okay, I gotta have a sound machine to earplugs. And when we are focused on this oak tree, focused on the government, and we're pruning back these branches, then we can avoid a big branch coming down and destroying this AC unit. Because imagine an AC unit that isn't working in the middle of summer in Charleston, South Carolina, with that humidity and that heat. What could happen is then you're going to have to leave the house. And similarly, with a big massive change that can happen from a policy perspective in your industry, is that you may have to leave then your business and close down your business. And that is something I do not want for small business owners, is to not be aware of what is going on when it comes to policies and not being informed. And again, we have over 1,000 industries. So I also do believe that some industries, small business industries, do have to go. Like, I do believe in that, where we're making it way more complex than it needs to be overall for our country. So let me go through these points. The first one I want to talk about is tariffs. There's a Supreme Court ruling that came down on tariffs for the method that the tariffs were being used, overturned the ability for the president to use that method, from my understanding. But now the administration is coming out with a new method for implementing these tariffs. But what he said in the State of the Union was, paraphrasing it, but it was saying that these tariffs could substantially replace the modern day income tax system. And we've talked about income tax before here on the show. And that I hope gets you really excited, because it does get me really excited too. Because I would be willing to pay more because again, the tariffs can get pushed down to the consumer. Or usually it gets pushed down to the consumer. I'd pay 100% tariff on an imported T-shirt in order to not have the federal income tax or state level income tax, or then we can get into sales tax, hospitality tax, depending on the type of business that you're running, to tour tax, like not having to deal with all that. So that absolutely got me really excited. The other one was AI data centers. We've talked about that before here on the show. And again, with this ownership series, it's like, how do we take more ownership? I think about that with our money, how we're spending our money, rather than as taxpayers having to pay more in taxes. That's where the tariffs, I get really excited about what could be possible here. But with the AI data centers, is then comes back to electricity bills. The money you're able, the amount of money when it comes to, and actually you could let me know, depending on where you're at in the United States, what has been the impact on your electricity bill these past few months, especially if you're in an area where there's a new data center that's come in. Because the amount of electricity usage with these, under like 6,000 data centers is a lot. And what was said last night was there was a pledge that was made. It's the Ratepayer Protection Pledge, stating a pledge for the big tech companies to create their own power sources and power plants, which then could help with the overall grid. This is where we got to hold our elected officials accountable of, like, is this actually going to happen? Because it's a pledge. And then the other one I want to talk about is homeownership. So when we own something, we can care about it more than if we're renting or leasing. That goes back to your home, to the building that your business is located in. There is if you got nothing that you own in this country, then what is there to defend? And that can be this feeling of depression that can come up with that. This apathy of fighting for our country and Western civilization. There can be this like, oh, I'm just going to be in it for myself. And we as human beings are naturally selfish. But that is where we have to rely on our values and moral values of doing more than just what's going to benefit us. But how can we benefit our community? How can we benefit our country? And home ownership, what was shared was an executive order that President Trump had done to stop corporations from buying single-family homes. And think about these corporations, they could be like Blackstone. Blackstone's been talked about. And that also gets me really excited. And I hope that gets you really excited too. Because when we can have more ownership in this country, then it becomes, we want to defend it more and protect and preserve what we have in this country. And again, this country is the greatest country in the world, and it can somehow that's been forgotten. There's been this hatred for the country, and yes, there are a lot of problems and there's a lot of evilness in this country. I think about the Epstein files, which was not mentioned in the State of the Union, which that disappointed me. But we have to also be reminded of the amount of our individual rights that we have through the Constitution, the liberty when it comes to our liberties and freedoms and pursuit of happiness, making sure that we are preserving what we as individuals get to benefit from this country for our rights, such as freedom of speech. And it's something where those rights are fragile, and we have to make sure that we are aware of that, and that we are, again, holding our government accountable and reminding ourselves that we don't have to be scared of the government, but that the government is there to serve us, the American citizen, and protect the American citizen. And that relationship has been strained. Like, we know that. Again, I go back to that question we have to ask ourselves: do we trust our politicians? And usually it's a no to start. So that gets me really excited with home ownership. And the other thing that I want to talk about for a point that was made was fraud. So he mentioned that where the fraud in Minnesota that happened, and he said he put out the number 19 billion. I've looked at estimates of 9 billion. Either way, it's a lot of money. And so going back to the taxes, we got to ask ourselves for the future, for America's future, does it make sense for solving our problems to have more taxes or less taxes? And I go with less taxes because I trust more you and us, the individual, in how to spend that money or give that money to charities, nonprofits, than the government. And it's the importance of making sure we're having infrastructure, which again, though, you got to ask yourself, how is the infrastructure in your city and town? So there's a lot of massive changes that need to happen, and we have to continue to hold the government accountable to that, from the federal level to state level to local level. And again, you don't have to know every single detail, but it's important to at least be informed with the basics in order to understand how we can continue to move forward to make America's future a small business renaissance. So going back to this ownership series, it can be a contrarian thinking of, like, as a small business owner, to also care about the country. Somehow that's become controversial to be able to say that. And I completely don't buy that narrative that as a small business owner, I just got to focus on myself and make sure that I'm taking care of my family. Those are all very important, and it goes back to what is the priority. And at the same time, if we are not taking care of this country overall, then how then can we have a great quality of life if we were living in an environment that is a terrible environment? So this is something to think about as small business owners, and the importance of sharing your voice, of knowing who your elected officials are on the local level, state level, and federal level, and then being able to make sure that you understand what is happening within your city and town, and on a state level too, and then overall in the country. And this is going to be a great place for the show to be able to learn more about that on the politics side. But again, as I said, it's politics, culture, theology, economy. It is all interconnected. And it's important to realize that moving forward, so they can make better decisions, more informed decisions that can not only improve the quality of the business for the day-to-day operations, but also your quality of life overall. So I'm excited to continue on this series. More to come with this ownership series. And if you, as a small business owner, want to connect with other small business owners in person, you can join us January 14th and 15th. 2027 in Charleston, South Carolina. And you can join other small business owners who also care about this country and want to improve this country, and believe that America's future is a small business renaissance, because the renaissance is coming. So you can check that out, A Future Fest, and excited to see you guys tomorrow.